Welcome to the Workshop Therapy Podcast. I am your host, Andrew, and today I'm joined by my erstwhile semi-frequent co-host, my wife. Do you want to say hi?
Hi.
Great.
Yeah.
People like you that much.
Mom. It's a lot of cheering, making me wildly uncomfortable.
I imagine why.
Flashing back to my musical moments. It's
You were good enough that they always cheered you for you.
been polite to not cheer in a long time to a solo performer.
I didn't know that. If I don't like it, I clap like twice and then move on.
No, we even had like a how you were allowed to clap.
Really?
Yeah. Yes, we did.
Interesting.
You're supposed to do two fingers like this if you were in the orchestra. Like when you were clapping for the conductor, you weren't ever like open palms, not okay.
You weren't supposed to make the loud, slappy
You got
claps.
two. It was very specific. We had to practice it.
Oh, that's good.
Definitely benefited me.
Definitely. Well, thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome.
You always make this so awkward.
What I'm supposed to do. You're welcome. I joined you.
The weird
You're
thing...
so welcome. I don't know. What else am I supposed to say?
Well, we always kind of flow into these natural conversations whenever we're just like talking to each other, and then as soon as the mic turns on, you're like,
Yep.
Climb up.
Well, I don't know what I'm supposed to say. And because I overanalyze and overthink everything I say in the first place, it's harder for me than you.
Makes sense. Are you saying I don't think about what I'm going to say?
Yes.
Okay.
But you don't filter as much as I do.
It's true. That's true. I tend to just kind of speak what's on my mind and then move on.
And not care what other people think about it.
Leaving the wreckage in my wake.
That is true.
That's why I married you, though, to pick up the pieces up from my destructive verbal tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway. So, anything exciting happening in your life?
What are you fishing for, Andrew Hatch?
I don't know.
Wait, should I say your last name? People know your last name.
Well, given that my social media channel is Hatch made it.
That makes sense. Sorry. Okay. Are you fishing for a specific thing? We're moving in 2 weeks. That's a lot.
That's exciting, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
I had some hives today.
That's always exciting and great to share. It's a great visual. That speaks to one of the reasons we're moving, though, I guess, is to get out of the place where you're literally allergic to everything. What about grad school?
What about it?
I don't know. Are you attending that made-up school?
The made-up school? I did get accepted to the University of Wollongong in Australia to do my master's in autism.
You have to admit that the University of Wollongong really does.
It might be Wollongong. I'm not really sure how they pronounce it.
Either way, the University of Wollongong or Wollongong does really sound like something Dr. Seuss came up with.
It does. But it's an awesome school. It's a great program.
And you're very excited.
I am very excited about it. It's something I've wanted to do for a really long time.
And you're also waiting to hear back from the University of Kansas.
Yeah. So we'll see which one we'll end up getting into and deciding on, I guess.
I'm probably hearing things, yes. I've needed the microphone anyway.
Yes. So I've been accepted to one program, waiting to hear on the second program. Then we have to make a decision. And by we, I mean me. Even though I don't want to. I would prefer if you just made the decision for me.
But I'm not going to. And if you end up just being so stuck in indecision that you end up going to two programs at the same time, that's your own problem, not mine. Well, I guess it would be mine.
We don't really know if I'm going to get into Kansas yet, but I did get the acceptance letter to Wollongong, and that was really exciting.
Yep,
very exciting.
So one of the precipitants of our move is the fact that our son got the diagnosis of autism, and that is obviously one of the reasons why you're interested in doing your master's as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, and I had to answer this question when I filled out applications a while ago. I've been interested in doing a master's in special education in this area for 15 years. And our son is only 14. So it's not that this isn't something that I'm like, because I thought a lot about that. I'm like, I'm not like just bandwagon jumping on it like Tiger Mom or whatever it is, right? Like this is an area of interest for me for a long time.
Yeah. And
having taught in the public school system and dealt with the anyway, blah blah blah. Continue.
Yeah, so we talked about it fairly extensively, and one of your hesitancies, things you were hesitant about doing the degree was, well, maybe I should, focus on teaching our son and then do this when I'm done, right?
Yeah.
And we had the conversation about what's the point of doing it for other people and then letting our family suffer for the lack of knowledge. And I think it kind of speaks to, obviously you made the decision to pursue the master's because the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. And the second best time to plant a tree is right now.
Yeah. And it's also not for me. Like I have looked for programs like this for a long time and I just haven't, for whatever reason, found them. Partially because I don't like searching for things on the internet as much as you do. But it feels like the right time. And that terrifies me because we're moving and building a house and you're still doing a master's and we have 3 kids and we're homeschooling and there's so many reasons to not do it. But like you were just saying, like we felt like the pursuit of the knowledge you're getting in your degree and then mine as well. It's not just for a job. It's so much more than that for us. It's the pursuit of knowledge for knowledge's sake too.
Yeah, there's definitely some of that. Pursuit of knowledge for knowledge's sake, but there's also,
I mean, not that I don't hope that we, be able to pay for it in the end, but
yeah. And so I was thinking we could talk about the importance of taking action versus allowing procrastination to rule.
Mm-hmm.
It's really easy to just say, "Oh, just jump in and do it," but to actually put that into action is kind of hard. And there's so many reasons why you shouldn't take action or why you shouldn't jump in, but we often let those.
Well, and I think as like a society, we're told that in so many different ways, and we're given so many things to numb us or to make us feel overwhelmed or to, like to stagnate our progress. That's probably not the right usage of that word either, but yeah, like you said, like there's just so many reasons not to. And I don't know how many people we've talked to are like, oh, better you than me. I couldn't wait to be out of school. I can't believe you're trying. Don't you have your hands full? I'm like, yeah, but hopefully I will have my hands less full when I gain more information on how to deal with this problem. And that's something that might not be as, I'm sure there's other places in the world and from Facebook groups and stuff that I'm part of that they have a lot of supports. Where we are, there is not a lot of supports.
Yeah, especially relative to some places in the world.
Yeah. And I admit that we are more rural, and probably if we were in Calgary or Edmonton, it would be, there is more there. But I mean, when you consider the size of our province and the resources are in 2 places, it's, yeah.
Yeah. More what I was thinking of, like, it's all very true what you said, but like, applying it on a broader perspective, though, there's always, I don't know too many people who are comfortable with always doing what somebody else tells them to do and just then going home and sitting and watching TV. And part of that is kind of the people that I interact with.
I know people like that.
And I know that there's people out there, but I also, myself included, feel like there's a lot of us who want to be doing more but don't know how to take the next step.
Oh.
So in your case, when you're knowing that you wanted to do this master's for a long time and you thought about it, and we've discussed it numerous times over the past 15 years plus, because we've been married longer than that. What's the thing that finally initiated that action for you? Like, why did you suddenly decide that now I'm going to do it? If you were to boil it down,
I don't know. Maybe there's a bit of like a more of an understanding of time passing as our son has become a teenager and wishing I'd found it and done it sooner. So maybe there's a little bit of that. I think
it's more of a sense of urgency.
Yeah, there's a sense of urgency, but I think there's also a sense of maybe I'm getting to the point where I don't care quite so much what other people say. I think I've let the opinions of other people being like, you're in mom phase right now. You can't do that. You're in teaching phase right now. It's too much. You need to get settled first. And I've let those things influence how I felt, or got too much on your plate, or blah, blah, blah. Whereas I think through some really great therapy with and discussions with you, which is also therapy for me, I think I'm getting to a point where I'm more confident in myself, more able to say, like, I'm not doing this so I can get a better career, better job, whatever. I mean, there's going to be aspects of that in the future, but I'm doing this because I want this for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It became intrinsic instead of extrinsic. And it's always been, for whatever reason, like I when I graduated with my second degree, I knew I wanted to get a master's degree. I've always wanted to get a master's degree. But I think until I found what I was more passionate about, and it became an intrinsic desire, I think that's where it switched for me.
Thanks.
Yeah.
This is where I should interject and say, check out the affiliate link to betterhelp.com in the links. Because that is honestly where we have been doing therapy for a number of months now, and it has been helpful. And I am still guilty of this feeling, and in the past, having the feeling that, oh, if you need therapy, there's something broken about you. And while that is the case often, I think there's also more use cases than, oh, I'm chronically depressed, or I have anxiety, or I have whatever. It's beneficial to have somebody to talk to, external to you. And it is motivating to have some sort of community support, or an individual that you can talk to who isn't going to judge you on your specific problems, and to help you move forward.
What was that quote that I sent to you today about being broken? Do you remember?
No, I don't.
Did I send it to you?
I think you said
I think I just showed it to you. Yes. Anyway, it's what does this sum up? Like, you can choose. I think everybody is going to be broken. And you can choose to let it break your spirit and to live in that broken state, or you can choose to get up and to grow out of the pieces. That's not how it was said, but is that kind of the like?
Yeah, you can choose to act or to be acted upon.
Yeah,
I've said that a number of times on this podcast. And this is where I'm going to expound a little bit of the research that I ran into recently here. So last week I was learning about suicide ideation. So people who are thinking about committing suicide and planning out how they do it and all that type of stuff. And so in kind of the general 16 to late 20s, early 30s age category, suicide ideation can be as high as 35 to 50%, depending on categories of the population. So like a quarter to a half.
That's a lot.
Yeah, like a significant number of people can be thinking about committing suicide at any given time. But the actual suicide rate is only 0.04% of the population. So that's a massive difference between the people who are thinking about suicide and the people who are actually going to commit suicide. And one of the distinguishing factors, and so there's all of these assessments, verbal and online questionnaire type of things to assess whether you're actually at a suicide risk, and most of them are garbage, frankly. But they what it actually is positively associated with, and by positive, not a good thing, but actually associated with committing suicide, is actually the mental state of feeling in control of those thoughts or not. So if you feel, like somebody's thinking about committing suicide, they have this, oh, maybe I should just kill myself thought. If they feel like that thought is just coming and they have no control over it whatsoever, they're vastly, vastly more likely to commit suicide than people who recognize that they're in control of their thoughts. And that's where, going back to kind of our earlier little bit of a conversation, I thought about it, is because we're often in situations where we're confronted with a problem. And we have one of two choices. We either have the choice to be acted upon by the problem, whether it's a work thing or a family thing or a creative pursuit thing, or we have the choice to act upon the problem. I sent you that article about autism, the letter to the friend, good. And one of the things that stood out to me in that was the two ways of describing being kicked by a horse. Right? Like you can say the man was kicked by a horse, or you can say the man let the horse kick him. And in that narrative, there's
two vastly different pictures come to mind.
Yeah, two vastly different pictures come to mind. And when we are in a situation where we have a problem, we can say the problem happened to us and we have no control over it. Or we can confront the problem and make decisions that change the course of the future events.
Well, and I think a lot of that comes about talking and normalizing talking about those things and your feelings with that. Because I think when you're talking about that suicide stuff and like the questionnaires, I was thinking about after I had, and they did, I don't remember doing it after our first was born, but after our daughters were born, the public health nurse called I went in for our first daughter, but then our second daughter was during COVID, so they just called me over the phone. And they just said, like, we're going to screen you for postpartum depression. And with our daughter, I mean, I'm not dumb. And so when I'm filling out the questionnaire, I'm like, oh, I don't want to put down what I'm actually feeling. Like, this makes me seem like a bad person or like a bad mom, or like all those thoughts are going through your head. And I'm aware of what a tester is going to look at these questions. I took how to write a test in school, right? Like, I understand how this is going to be scored. And I still got back the result with that health nurse that said, she's like, oh, you're kind of on the cusp, but you have a good family and you look healthy, you're fine. And I knew I was struggling, but I didn't have the voice to say at that point, hey, like, this isn't going very well for me. I'm really having a hard time. The transition with this has been difficult. There's been a lot of past trauma brought up from the first one, blah, blah, blah. I didn't have the knowledge, the resources, the wording even to talk to her about that. And I think that's really important in what you're talking about. Like, if we don't give our kids the skills to be like, hey, like, this is like we've been talking to our son about sadness because he's having a hard time with transitions. He's obviously autistic and ADHD, and that goes with that. And he's having a hard time with this life transition, and he's feeling sadness, and he feels things deeply. And one of the things I think that we're trying to do is to normalize feeling it.
Yeah.
Because if you can feel it and you can understand that it's a feeling and you can let the feeling move through you and you can talk to someone and you can find coping mechanisms, then it's not going to become the problems. And then you're going to be able to reach those goals and to see those things that you want to do for you.
Yeah.
And not for other people. But I think a lot of people get lost in those screening processes with their therapists or with doctors or somebody else because we're not dumb people. We understand what they're looking. The questions are not really vague. They're pretty obvious. You know, do you feel like you want to leave your baby or kill your baby? Of course you can. No. Right? But and nobody who's really in that's why women get missed on those things because yeah.
That's why it also speaks to being honest with other people.
And I think that starts with us, like as parents, teaching our kids that honesty, right? In simple things, like not lying. We talked about this with our therapist today, actually. Were you on when we were talking about it with her? She's like, yeah, you know, it is simple things. Like when your kid turns 12 or turns 13, you don't say, oh, just tell them you're 12 so they can get the cheap ticket at the movie or the cheap meal at the dinner. You start by, you know, letting them be honest from there.
Yeah. If you're honest with the little things, it's easier to be honest with the big things. And
And I think too, like, be honest with your kids when you're having a rough time or when something you've made creatively hasn't gone well. Be honest with yourself too. Wow, that didn't work. What can I do now? I know for me, that's very difficult to do. And I can get down on myself pretty fast. That didn't work out. I'm a failure. I should never try this again. And I think that's something people on the ADHD spectrum, they struggle with that a lot because lots of things come the first time really naturally and easily. But a second time is very difficult to do because the dopamine's gone.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I think you see that a lot in the maker community.
Yeah.
A lot of the listeners in this podcast can probably attest to the fact that, you know, oh, I've done that, now I want to do something else. Even if it is like I'm a woodworker and I'm always going to be a woodworker, but you know, I've cut ducktails. Now I want to cut this or I want to cut that, and that's where, like, a couple of years ago when I did my little hand cut joinery practice thing for a month or whatever it was.
You lost the love.
No, I didn't lose the love for it, but I do one, and logically I know practicing a single joint is going to make me better at that single joint, but once I got that one, then I wanted to move on to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a consequence, I think I improved my skill quite a bit, but all of the joints that I did make were kind of junky. But once I went back and recut, like the first one I cut was a bridle joint, arguably the simplest joint. Basically just 2 straight cuts and you get rid of the waste and blah, blah, blah. And then I got to the point of cutting a sunrise dovetail, which is fairly complex. And it didn't turn out very nice. It worked. But then I went back and I cut the bridle joint and it was much, much better. But I didn't want to go back and cut the bridle joint because I'd already done that. And so I think, to your point of it's easy the first time and then hard the second time because of the dopamine hit, and bringing this all full circle, you have degrees. What are you feeling like now that you're approaching a big milestone, the big thing?
I've gone through this a lot in my head. I'm like, I know that the first couple months I'm going to be super gung ho, super excited. It's great. And I know by the end I'm going to be like, oh, please just let me get it done. because I know that's a pattern in things, but I think something that I've been really impressed with the pacing, because when I was in school, I very much pushed to get everything done faster than I could and do more than I can. And I took summer courses, and I would work I would work 10, well, I'd get up in the morning for an 8 o'clock class. I would go to class from 8 o'clock to 9:30. I would work 10 to 6. I would go out with friends, be home around 2, 3 o'clock, go to sleep, and start the whole process all over, because I was pushing to get through things faster and to take more classes and to have more information. And I think I missed out on a lot because I pushed. And so watching you do this master's, and we did that too when you were in your chiropractic degree. We pushed to get you through it faster. We worked through summers. We didn't take breaks. With this degree, just financially, we can't afford to pay for more than one semester at a time. But you could condense yours, but we're not able to. But watching, and we had this conversation, that the pacing has been nice. There's more absorption of material. It's not as stressful. And so I think I'm more willing going into this to not push as hard.
Yeah, that's good.
And that's something that actually just came out talking to my therapist today, that I could enjoy the process of it and enjoy the knowledge gaining and not just be focused on end outcome, getting a job, moving on,
Yeah, and that's kind of counterintuitively, I guess, that saying taking it easier also makes it easier to do better. Like I'm
reading that slow productivity book, and I think that's been helping too. Just you can do more by doing less.
Yeah.
And your overall product is going to be superior.
Yeah, well, and that's what I was going to say. Is like I will admit that I'm a good student. Like
I don't know that you were your first year.
Yeah, my first year, but that was just pure laziness and unpreparedness. Like I graduated with my undergrad. I had several 4.0 semesters, and I did 3.3 as my GPA out of 4, which is pretty decent. My chiropractic degree, I was around the 3.0, but this master's, pacing it better, I'm at a 3.9. And so not feeling pressured to pack more in. And I'm also approaching it with the thought of I'm going to do good enough. Because I've been through programs before. I already know that once you're done, nobody looks at your GPA, so it doesn't matter. So I'm going to do...
Unless you're claimed as a program.
Yeah. But I'm going to do good enough. I'm not going to stress about it. I'm not going to push myself to do extra work just for the sake of doing extra work. And at the end of the day, I'll turn into paper and I'll go, that's not my best work. And I could do better, but I just stop myself and go, this is enough. I'm done. And it'll come back with, a good enough degree or a good enough grade. Is the effort to attain a 4.0 worth the effort? I don't know.
But that's something that we talked about when you started this degree too, though. We weren't doing this degree because we were planning to make lots and lots of money in the end. We were doing this degree because we know that we needed the information to improve our family life.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm approaching it, I think, the same way and differently than I was before. I feel like when you get out of high school, at least for me, it was, what school are you going to? What degree are you taking? What job are you going to get when you're done?
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of talk about how are you going to manage working and going to school or paying for school? What are you going to do about relationships and all of these, like your actual life? How is that going to exist? Oh, wait, I was the kid who moved out, got into my first apartment. I'd never turned a washing machine on. I didn't know how to run the dishwasher. I didn't know how to boil water. I had no idea. And all of those things were very hard and very stressful.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of those things in my roundabout way of like tying it back to autism at the beginning is those kids need us to help them prepare more for what's coming up in their life. But it's not just those kids either.
Yes.
We've seen it in kids that we know that are reaching adulthood and that are struggling, but specifically with anybody who's on the spectrum of autistic, ADHD, all those kinds of things, you're going to struggle with that dopamine problems. You're going to struggle with being interested in something that isn't your area of interest. I know there's going to be things like the class on research methodologies. It's not going to be my favorite. I'm totally sure of that. And I'm sure I'm going to rely on you, like talking to you and asking you questions and all of that. But I think I'm also at a point in my life where I'm okay asking questions and saying, hey, I'm not really sure how to do this. Because as we've gone through the diagnosing our son and realizing genetic components and going, oh, wow, that make a whole lot more sense. It takes some of the burden off of me for feeling inadequate. And so I think as makers, especially, I see it in friends who are artists and stuff, we are hard on ourselves. And a lot of it is because we're struggling with things like undiagnosed ADHD. I'm not saying, oh, go get diagnosed as ADHD, but realize that you can have things that make it harder for you to do those things and not to get down on yourself for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and give yourself grace, especially when you're comparing yourself to social media. And lots of us, our communities now are online. Like I honestly don't have any local. Well, I have very few local woodworking friends, and one I don't really interact with them all that much, the people who are local to us. 99% of my maker friends are online acquaintances.
Uh-huh.
Most of them, some of them I don't even know what their faces look like. but so we end up comparing ourselves online a lot, and we we're all guilty of showing the best side on the pictures online, and everybody else is doing that too. And so we then are very hard on ourselves, and we look at other people's productivity and go, holy crap, how do you do all of that stuff? And forget to realize that everybody else is looking at us and saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know if this was a bit of a rambly episode or not.
Probably. You had me on, so I'm sure it's rambly. I was just trying to remember. I was reading an article that was talking about I'm not going to be able to find it, but anyway, it was talking about how few people with autism and ADHD, how the percentage of them who are happily employed and working in fields that they want to and stuff is so low. And I think so much of it is just because we're not accepting of those differences as much as we call ourselves an inclusive society. We're not.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think what you were just saying, like, give yourself grace. If you don't fit in and you find your friends online and that's easier for you, just accept it. Don't. And I'm guilty of this. Don't try and fit in with people that you're not comfortable around or that don't bring out the best in you.
Yeah.
Find your people.
Wherever.
Find what you want to do and go for it. Am I terrified of starting a master's degree? Well, you still have a master's degree to finish and the house to build and everything else. Absolutely petrified. But like you said, the best time to plant a tree was yesterday. So.
But to be honest, as we're progressing down this path,
I don't think I was in the headspace to have been where I am.
I don't think so either.
A few years
ago. I don't think I was either. But, a few years ago, we listened to a speaker who was talking about having faith in stepping forward into the future. And often we look forward and we don't know what the next step is going to be. We don't know. Like Indiana Jones has got to take that step of faith onto the bridge that he can't see. And so this particular speaker said, have the faith to step into the darkness. And more often than not, you'll find that your next step is lighted. And so as we're making our life changes, it's not Hollywood Hallmark Hall of Fame movies where we took the step into the darkness and somebody
grandmother's fortune of $10 million and a farm and everything's fine now.
Yeah, it's not that. It's not Hollywood
at all. But there's a little candle and there is some light, and it is worth moving forward for.
Yeah, and there's steps.
And the light does get brighter, I think, as you move
hopefully
towards it. Well, I feel like it already has.
Yeah, and there's things that allow you to have a little bit more faith in your next step and any sort of creative endeavor, whether it's learning or whether it's making something. That's always the initial step is always the hard one.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you take the next step and you find that there's a challenge there to overcome. And as you think about it, you see the next step and you make that step. And before you know it, you've climbed the mountain or gone on the journey, whatever metaphor you want to use.
And I think that's where it only works if you find that intrinsic motivation for it. Yeah, as long as we're relying on somebody else or somebody else's narrative or whatever, it's always going to be harder. And I say that from a place of experience.
Yeah. Well,
so give yourself grace today. Give yourself a hug. Tell yourself you're doing okay. It's hard. Life is hard.
And it's going to continue to be hard.
Yeah.
But at least there's exciting experiences coming down the way.
And know that, there might not be people in your corner that you can see, but there's lots of virtual people in your corner. And I hope in this community that are behind you and support you in what you're doing.
I think so. And with that, something that I very rarely ask, and I should ask more, is if you're in that corner, if you're a community member who wants to see us succeed, and you want to see other people succeed, go to Apple Podcasts, leave a review. Really appreciate that. If you're on Spotify, I'd love to see you interact on the little polls that get posted at the end of these episodes. There's also opportunities. We have yet to have anybody send in a question to questions@workshoptherapypodcast.com. So send those in. And we'd appreciate it.
I just realized nodding my head. This is not really helpful. Yes, please do.
It's really good on an audio podcast to nod. She's over in the corner going, hallelujah! Yes, for sure. In a very nonverbal way.
Very nonverbal. Yeah, ask us questions. I'd love to get a question.
Yeah. And for those of you who are listening and who are supporters of Patreon, on Patreon, we really appreciate the support. Because of schedules, obviously building a house, both of us doing masters, there's going to be some changes in the podcast. Probably going to be more of these. I'm going to be trying to be a little bit more diligent about getting short research briefs out. But in all honesty, there's probably going to be fewer external guests. If you want to be a guest, again, reach out via social media or questions@workshoptherapypodcast.com. Either one will work. And I'd love to get you on. Yeah. Again, those of you who are supporting on Patreon, I really appreciate it. Questions, reviews, and I think the best thing to help the show grow, we've been kind of plateaued a little bit over the last 10 or so episodes. And I don't know if that's my fault or somebody else's. It's all your fault, not yours. It's you listeners.
I haven't done anything. That's probably my fault, actually.
It would be to share the show. We'd really appreciate to share the show on social media, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, wherever you happen to dwell. I know a few of you are on YouTube. There's a community post thing there that you can do. And we'd really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Because it does help the show grow. And we're going to we're trying our best to help other people muddle through this life, whether it's through their shop, their creative outlets, whatever it is. So that's the rambly conclusion. Thanks for listening. So if you found anything from this episode to be helpful and you want to reinforce it for yourself, I'd like to invite you to share it with a friend in the next 24 hours. That'll help reinforce it in your mind, and it'll help those around you, which is always a good thing. So thanks again for listening, and now I'd like to say thank you to all the amazing patrons of the Workshop Therapy podcast. You guys make the show possible. If you're finding the show helpful and you want to support it, there are a few tiers, including a simple $1 a month option to just say thanks. For $5 a month, you can get access to the patrons only feed that has a pre-show and a post-show, in addition to the regular podcast, all in one feed. You all know that the good stuff happens after the official mics are off, right? If you can't support financially, I totally understand, but I'd love it if you left a 5-star review or told a friend about the podcast. If you have any questions or feedback, I'd love to hear that as well. Send it to questions@workshoptherapypodcast.com and I'll get it on the show. I want to say thank you to all the patrons of the Workshop Therapy podcast, but especially to the founding fathers, and they are Mr. Matthew Serio from Argiano Serio, Mr. Brad Harrison of Brad's Customs, Mr. Keith Drennan of Blackthorn Concepts, Mr. Eric Peterson of Overall Maker Works, Mr. Brandon Millichamp of Tectonic Creations, and the one and only the Grant Alexander. So a special thank you to the founding fathers, and thank you to everybody who supports and shares the Workshop Therapy podcast.